Ya Ali Madad. Welcome to Dr. HASSAM's Zoom session of Monday, July 19, 2021 at noon Pacific Time. In this lecture, Dr. HASSAM will continue to talk about body, mind and spirit, and his topic for today in particular is connecting with the spirit, a practical approach. This is part 2 of a series of 2 lectures. Last week in part 1, Dr. HASSAM gave us some practical insights on this topic, and that was very, very inspiring. And I'm sure today also we're in for a treat. So I invite you all to sit comfortably and enjoy this session. Thank you. So we will begin by a Gnan recitation by ALWAAZ Ali Bai, and ALWAAZ is going to recite Sataguru Milya Munne Aaj by Sayyidah Imam Begum, and she will recite verse 1, 2 and 6. And I'm going to read the translation of these verses. O brothers, today I have found, recognized the true guide. Thus, I achieved satisfaction and bliss within me, Anand. When I recognized the true guide, he removed all my pains and sorrows of separation. The Lord perfected this servant of his by purifying all her tasks. Thus, I achieved satisfaction and bliss within me, Anand. When he graced me with his Didar vision, I experienced peace in my mind and attained the kingdom of the most exalted state. Thus, I achieved satisfaction and bliss within me. Sayyidah Imam Begum says, listen, O my brothers, Hazrat Ali alayhi salam and Hazrat Nabi Muhammad salvatullah alayhi are the true laws. Thus, I achieved satisfaction and bliss within me, Anand.
Sataguru Milya Munne Aaj Anand Hu Pami. Eji Sataguru Milya Tare Dukh jata liya ji sarve sarya dasina kaj anand hu pami. Eji darshan dekhya tyare man santo kiya ji mahapad pami chu raj Nand hu pami. Eji kahe tai Imam Begum, suno mora vai ji ale Nabi che sirtaj nanda hu pami.
Thank you, Almas. That was really beautiful. Yali Mother Dr.
Yeah,
Hassam,
yeah, that's Lakshmi.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are all eager to listen to you.
Before I start, well, first I wanted to welcome Almas to our webinar today. Thank you for such a beautiful recitation. And many of you perhaps know Almas is a professional singer, that I call her, and she truly is an amazing entertainer, especially during Kushali time, when part of an orchestra entertaining the Jamaat for Imamat Day, for our Hazrat Imam's birthday, Navroz, whatever the occasions may be, they're always there, spoiling the Jamaat and basically raising the spirit of the Jamaat through their songs and entertainment. So thank you for being here today, Almas, and what a beautiful recitation and what a beautiful Ginan. And in that regard, also, I want to acknowledge Lakshmi, who actually worked hard to give us more or less a very precise meaning of the verses of the Ginan, because as you may know, there are many types of translations there, but the translation she worked on truly is very close to words. And you know, it's very difficult to translate Ginanic words, even though they may appear very, very common, like the word Anand, for example, which I'll have to say something about it in a minute. But simply to tell you that this is a very important task, and because accuracy in words determines often the meaning that people will carry with them as people recite the Ginans. And along the same lines, I acknowledge the contributions of Zahir and Faiza and Nayab, who's at the moment invisible because of her personal engagement. But what beautiful slides she's producing every session. They are work of arts. And seeing the whirling dervish today adds just that much more radiance to what the slides are. So Nayab, thank you so much for your artistic creativity and contribution and the beautiful slides that you make. And we will, down the road in these sessions, hopefully make use of your creativity for more information into these slides. So let me get right into the crux of things. So first of all, some background comments about the Ginan. You know, I have always said to you, and today in my session, when I come to that particular segment, I will speak more about the Ginan in the context of ensuring that what is the relationship of Ginan with the subject today, connecting with the spirit, a practical approach. But right now, I do want to make a few comments, and that is, remember, always remember, that we have in our tariqah a wonderful body of higher spiritual wisdom and knowledge, that we call marifat, and that is infused in the tradition of the holy Ginans brought to us by our holy peers. And why am I saying this to you? I'm saying this to you because it is relevant to our topic today in the context of connecting with the spirit. And you know, you will find miraculously how our holy peers, in the context of having weaved these Ginans And I'm saying weave, like making a necklace and weaving a tapestry, weaving a tapestry of love and knowledge in a way when we participate in it through singing, because ginans were meant to be sung. And when we are singing them, like you hear in Jumat Khana, for example, or when people sing them, and today many people have contributed in their own way in webinars and in whether it's YouTube or other means to for people to hear the ginans. You can log onto these ginans and you would be, as I said, wonderstruck to hear them. So you know there are few people who have their site. Now, I just mentioned a few. There are many, but there are some that I log into every now and then. One site of the Ginan is that of Shama Judah. Beautiful voice, hypnotizing voice, and many amazing Ginans, including the one that Almas recited today and many others. The other one is that of Ali Sundarji. The other one is that there is an Indian group that also have produced sets of Ginans. There is the Ginan Guru site, which is different than others in terms of its multiplicity. And Aman Judah is the organizer behind that one there. So, and there are others, as I said, Shabnam Merali and other names that are there that don't come to mind right away. But they are all in their own way beautifully pluralistic and accommodating. And so we need to participate more into these ginans every day in every way, because there is some kind of, if I can use the word magic, and truly, and I use the word magic not in that circus sense, but magic in an alchemical sense. What do I mean by that? Magic in an alchemical sense means that some important impact is made into the soul and the intellect and the heart that creates transformation. And that is the power of Ginans. So I'll come back to it in this lecture as we move along. So this Ginan was beautiful. Remember some of the key principles in this Ginan, especially about recognizing who is the bearer of the Nur, which Sayyidina Imam Begum here says, Satgur, and of course the word Anand, which is a very, very powerful word when it comes into the Ginans and what it is in reference to. So now, to dive into the notion of connecting with the spirit, and I'm going to accelerate a bit because I don't want to exceed my time, and this is part 2 of 2, and I may recap very quickly what I said in part 1, just very briefly, but let me here introduce a concept that I haven't in part 1, and that concept is the concept Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has mentioned in his memoirs. So I'm going to make reference to the memoirs and look what he says. Imam says, and I quote, "It is said that we live, move, and have our being in God." I won't give extended commentary right now because in my next week lecture, hopefully, I'm going to pick up some of these pieces and which I will tell you in the course of this lecture. But in this lecture, I want to just to take the key point. We live, move, and have our being in God, Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam says. So I'm asking you, for you to ask the question to yourself, if we live, move, and have our being in God, then where is the notion of connecting with the Spirit? It means you already are into that ocean, into this vast ocean that you call God. And in the past, in some of my earlier lectures, not in this series, but before that, I had mentioned some anecdotes that Sufis give, and the Sufis, what do they say? They gave the analogy of a fish. Just like a fish swims into this vast ocean, and the fish keeps asking, where is this ocean that everyone is speaking about? Which is no different than what our beloved Imam here says. We live, move, and have our being in God. So what do? Like that fish, we keep asking, but where is that? I don't realize that I'm living and I'm moving and I'm having my being in God. So you can see the parallel into this analogy. So what is it that is preventing us to know? We are coming to that. And we will take the answer from the teachings of the Holy Imam himself. But there is, of course, obviously some kind of a veil, some kind of an obstacle that doesn't allow us to realize that indeed we live, move, and have our being in God. Then our beloved Imam continues and says, we find this concept expressed often in the Quran, not in those words, of course, he says, but just as beautifully and more tersely. Then the Imam continues and says, but when we realize the meaning of this saying, we are already preparing ourselves for the gift of the power of direct experience. We are already preparing ourselves with the gift of with the power of direct experience. So the Imam continues and gives some example, and the Imam says, Rumi and Hafiz, the great Persian poets, have told us, each in his different way, that some men are born with such natural spiritual capacities and possibilities of development that they have direct experience of that great love, that all-embracing, all-consuming love, which direct contact with reality. Look at this word, direct contact with reality. This is what we mean by connecting with the Spirit. Direct contact with reality gives to the human soul. And the Imam says, Hafiz indeed has said that men like Jesus Christ and Muslim mystics like Mansur and Bayazid and others have possessed that spiritual power of the greater love. That any of us, if the Holy Spirit ever present grants us that enlightenment, can, being thus blessed, have the power which Christ had. But then the Imam here says, but that to the overwhelming majority of men, listen to this carefully, but that to the overwhelming majority of men, this greater love is not a practical possibility, unquote. Of course, the Imam goes on further to add many other forms and many other sort of description. Now, all of this I'm saying to you because I want you right here immediately to keep in your mind that this is how, in the memoirs, remember this is a public document, how the Holy Imam describes this concept of how we move, we live, and have our being in God, right? Now, the idea behind my presentations, as I like to say, that's why we always begin with material that is related directly to our tariqah, And in our tariqah, we need to ensure that we understand that our theories and our practice is very different, very different than the overwhelming majority of other paths that exist there. So let's move on. So I am going to jump to something I said last week and then come back with continuing with this point that I'm leaving about our tariqah. So I'm coming back to the notion of our tariqah. And I want to emphasize it again in the strongest term. I am not focused here with other tariqahs in what they say in the context of connecting with the spirit. I am concerned how our tariqah and how our beloved imams and our holy peers and the holy prophets and the Quran and what applies to our tariqah enables us in a very practical way in this lecture that I want to share the notion of connecting with the spirit. And you know, it's wonderful to have philosophical, metaphysical, historical, and many other things connecting with the spirit and so on. But because we believe in practice, meaning we want to connect our din with dunya and dunya with din. As our beloved Imam explained, they are intertwined. So we need the practice, the practical approach. Now, what did I say last week? I mentioned many things related to the notion of the fact that the mind has amazing capabilities and the mind has amazing powers. The power of decision making. Remember? The power of unselfish action. The power that the mind can conceive of things that are very, very, very powerful indeed. And the power of decision making, the power of unselfish action, the power of concentration. Now, there are many facets to it, but I want you to remain concentrated on what I need to say related to this lecture. So some people had sent me some messages to say, because they're probably new into the session, but I want to say, I often mention the 5 passions of the mind, or our Gnan says, Panch Bu Netame Varo, or the 5 groups of negative, toxic thoughts. Okay, so I'll spend maybe a minute or two so that we are in the same page, and said those who don't understand what I mean, so we can be in the same page. Now remember, in our Ginans, our peers have explained this thing in very great length. So right now, I'm identifying for you, at least for those who don't know, that our peers have said in the Ginan that stay away from these 5 groups of toxic thoughts. You know, like acid that burns through cloth or metal or any other thing and destroys things. These 5 group of toxic thoughts, they are toxic. Why? Because if these toxic thoughts are allowed into the mind, they will create negative, destructive emotions. Okay, so if you're asking yourself, how are emotions created that are of a very negative, destructive nature? Emotions can be very destructive, and negative emotions can indeed be very, very concerning to the individual if they realize that they are flooded with this negative emotion, and the root cause of these negative emotions is these toxic thoughts. But they are into 5 group, okay? So very quickly, the first group is called Kam, the second group is known as Krodh, the third group is known as Lob, The fourth group is known as mad, and the fifth group is known as moh. So Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. These are given in the Ginan. We identified some of them in last week's Ginan. Now, what is Kam? Kam is that group of thoughts related to lust. And under the context and framework of lust, many other things are there, right? Because it's a group. Things like self-indulgence, which is obviously one of the principles of Kaljug, lust, the degradation of human sexual nature, abnormal desires, alcoholic drinks, tobacco, food that are eaten purely for the provocation of lower passion, inordinate desire, one that simply identify with the human lower nature, covetousness, and all those negative things are part of lust. I think we understand the word. Krodh means anger by definition. But anger is not just one thing. There is a whole group of things within anger, and they are the most dangerous one. Because this anger is so bad, we have been told in our Ginans and in the Farmans by the Imam, stay away from it. If you are one who are going to be reactive because of anger, you have a serious problem. And it is one of the most destructive action among these five groups. And they destroy the mind. Things like wrath, rage, fury, mental carcinoma, slander, evil gossip, backbiting, impatience, malice, resentment. All these are the children of anger. If you are suffering from the poison of anger, all of these things will be in you inherently to react upon. Do you see what I mean by group? Then the third one is lobh, means greed. And I'll just mention a few things. What are the children of greed? Lying. You know why I mentioned lying? Let me explain to you something about the concept of lying very quickly. Do you know the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our peers also have said it, and in the Quran, Allah says, those who lie, they carry with them the curse of God. Remember this. Those who lie, they carry with them the curse. It's a curse of God. And our beloved Imam has been very strong to guide us to say, don't lie. Do not lie. It's a very bad thing. It will destroy your spirituality. Anyway, perjury, robbery, misrepresentation, bribery, trickery of all sorts, all of these come under the category of lobh, greed. So greed has all of these tentacles. And then mahad. Mad means pride, vanity. Another word that is often used is ahankar. So bigotry, self-admiration, making a false show of wealth, bossiness, scolding, fault finding. This is a common one. People, when something goes wrong, find a fault with somebody else, fault finding, making a show of religion, being noisy about being charitable, things like that. These are all related to pride, mahad. And then the last one is moh. Moh means attachment. But what kind of attachment? Delusive attachment, infatuation, procrastination, anxieties, ignorance, darkness or delusion of the mind, preventing, which basically creates an obstacle for you to know the truth. That kind of attachment. So many things can be said about that, but these are the 5 groups. And do you know how they are related? These 5 groups, they are related by this connection. So if you happen to have, so it says in the scriptures, when I say scriptures, in the mystical traditions that are divinely revealed, what do they say? For a human being dwelling in the object of the senses, an attachment is born. From attachment, desire is born. From desire, anger is born. From anger arises delusions. From delusion, wandering of the memory. From memory wandering, destruction of intelligence. From destruction of intelligence, one is lost. So look at the connection. Attachment, desire, anger, delusion, wandering of memory, destruction of intelligence. Is that what you are seeking in life? Because once the human intellect is destroyed, what is left? You know what is left? Oh, you will still be there, but you will be no better than an animal. This is the difference. That's why the intellect plays a significant role. Now, the whole purpose of that was to emphasize, if you allow anything of these 5 categories of toxic thoughts in your mind, it will generate negative emotions. And when you are a prisoner of this negative emotion, you know what? You cannot make connection with the spirit. No way. Not possible. Not possible to make connection with the spirit. You will simply remain very perturbed, very disturbed, very uneasy, very uncomfortable. So you find that people are always moody and angry, and nothing ever satisfies them. They are always very instantly reactive rather than thinking. That is the reason why I mentioned those 3 powers of the mind, which was the power of concentration, the power of decision making, and the power of unselfish action. Now you tell me, if these are the 3 great powers of the mind, there are other aspects, but I'm using this as a very practical approach. Don't you need to concentrate? Let me ask you this. Don't you need to concentrate on various tasks, including prayers, including higher prayers? Don't you need to concentrate in your work? Don't you need to concentrate when you read? Don't you need to concentrate in order to gain results in what you do? Or do you want your concentration to be just all over the place? And the result of that is zero achievement. How about the power of decision making? If you don't have clarity of the mind, if your mind is not clear, how will you make decisions? Is there a way? There is no way. No way you can make the right decision if your mind does not have clarity. What do I mean by clarity? Purity. And there's a reason for it. Thirdly, unselfish action. Meaning, if you do your action for only personal gratification at the cost of someone else, that is very selfish. Those kind of action will not lead you to any good deeds. Now, I want to be clear. What I mean by action here, it doesn't mean that when you take certain action, that they are good action and they don't benefit you. Of course, we take action to benefit us. but we always have a balance in our action potential, meaning we look at what is the result of the action we will create. Because remember, for every action, there is a reaction. Yes? Jevu vavsho, tevu lunsho. As you sow, so shall you reap. So you use the spiritual formula for your action very practically. Immediately, your reason, if it is clear, your thinking, if it is clear, your decision making, if it is clear, your concentration, if it is clear, what do you say? No, this action is not in accordance with my faith. This action is not in accordance with the teachings of my tariqah, of my faith. Right? So, your heart, your mind, your intelligence, your decision making is able to come forward to help you in that action. That's why we have to emphasize the word unselfish, meaning it will not do damage to somebody. You are not putting your hand in somebody else's pocket and causing them damage or loss, right? That is part of the ethical framework that our beloved Imam always asks us to maintain. I'm not saying these are easy things in a very perturbed and turbulent world that we are living, but remember, we are accountable in this world for everything that we do, for our relationship, for the business that we conduct, for everything that we do. Remember, our beloved Imam has given the example of Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this regard. Having said that, we need to really focus on always remembering in a practical way. Like I said, there are many other dimensions and many other layers which we'll speak maybe down the road. But today and forever, I would like you definitely at least these three important strands to remember the power of concentration. Is your concentration pure? How do you achieve that concentration? That concentration can only be achieved through purification of the heart, which gives concentration and which is obtained through unselfish action. Do you see why? Unselfish action is the route that enables the individual to achieve concentration in that real pure sense. You see how they are related? The first one was concentration of the mind. The second was the power of decision making. And the third, the power of unselfish action. They are powers. So if you behave accordingly, these powers manifest in you. Now let me say something of again connecting with the spirit in a very practical way. When I say power of concentration, power of decision making, power of unselfish action, what do I mean by power? What do I mean by power? Do you know these qualities are divine qualities given to the human being as a loan or a gift? You know, animals don't have these qualities developed to the level of a human being. They have their own ways, but they are animal, and it's a fundamental difference. Why is the human being considered Allah's greatest creation? And you know what our beloved Imam says? It is the intellect that makes that difference. If it is the intellect, then I ask you that question. Is the power of concentration not part of the intellect? Is the power of decision making not part of the intellect? Is the power of unselfish action not part of the intellect? There you are. That's what makes the human being different than any other creation. Because the human being, our beloved Imam is teaching us, it is Allah's greatest creation. Now, if indeed we are that greatest creation, then we have a huge responsibility in front of us and above us to be that way. So, concentration, so I'm expanding here the practical part, attainment of that concentration that we are speaking about means freedom from attachment to sense object and actions. Freedom, I repeat, freedom from the attachment of sense objects and actions, and the renunciation of all personal desires. Personal meaning what? Desires that are intended only for self-gratification and no other reason. Now, I know there are many layers of understanding that, but try to understand it at whatever level your own mind allows you to do that. Now, let me move quickly. I want to say a lot about the mind in this context, but we need to move on. So what I want to say here, and remember the context of my speaking right now, those five groups of toxic thoughts, when introduced into the mind, create negative emotions. And as a result of these negative emotions, what happens? Our power of concentration is disturbed. Our power of decision-making is blurred. And our power to achieve unselfish action is non-existent. Everything becomes for the sake of one's benefit alone at the cost of others. Unselfish action. So all of these are not in alignment with the spirit, as a result of which these negative emotions that arise out of these, the five group of toxic thoughts, are very, very dangerous and will not allow you to make connection with the spirit. So I have mentioned that you need to change the thoughts that come inside. So instead of making those thoughts, instead of going into the group of these five negative thoughts, five negative groups of thoughts, what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that is, remember the five groups, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, and Mad. So we have Sat, Saburi, Zikr, Kamiya, and Iman. Sat, referring to truth. Saburi, patience. Zikr, the notion of remembrance, which I'll be speaking about it today in a few minutes. Kamiya, tolerance. Iman, faith. Now, think about these five concepts. So instead of leaching into these five groups of negative, toxic, acidic puddle, change it practically. Remember, we want a practical approach. Concentrate on truth. Let your mind think. Ask yourself, is this the truth? If it is the truth, go with it. If it is not the truth, ask divine help. Mawla, help me. I don't want untruth. That is Sat. Look, I can spend a whole lecture telling you about this concept of Sat. But today is not the time, but you understand where I'm going. Even at a very basic embryonic level of your being, you know what I mean by Sat and truth. And which truth are we talking about? The truth as taught to us by our imams in our tariqah, meaning the truth of Holy Farman, the truth you find in Holy Ginans, the truth you will hear when Qasidas and Mankabats are recited. It is the truth. Okay? So listen to that. That's the foundation. The next one, Saburi, patience. There is a huge blessing that is hidden in the concept of patience. I don't have time today to speak deeply, but let me tell you this. That is the antidote of anger, patience. Okay? You need to be patient of many things, but you need to cultivate patience. Impatience will destroy. You know what patience does? Let me give you a connection of this idea in the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, listen to this. Allah is with those who are patient. Now, I want you to take just a few seconds in your mind right now as you hear this. If you truly believe, now remember, this is a verse in the Quran. I don't have the ayat. Yeah, I can find it for you. It is in chapter 2, in Surah 2 of the Quran. Allah is with those who are patient. So, if Allah is with those who are patient, so here you are. You are going through some turmoil, you are going through some difficulty, you are going through some calamity, you are uneasy, you are suffering from all kind of instability. You even want to go and do something because you think you have the power of doing it, and you forget the fact that there is something of the divine. And I have that ayat here. Let me see if I can find it for you. Yes, here it is. So remember what we are speaking about. Look at this ayat. Look at this ayat. This is in Surah number 6, verse 17. It says, if, listen to this carefully, if Allah touch thee with affliction, none can remove it but He. So if some difficulty comes to you, some affliction comes to you. Now remember, there are two kinds. There are those that are naturally occurring, and there are those that you have created with your own hands. How? How do you create those with your own hands? By being a slave of these 5 groups of toxic thoughts. Those are the ones that create affliction, that you yourself create. But the ayat here says, if Allah touched thee with affliction, none can remove it but He. So if something has occurred in that light, what are you going to do about it? Because the ayat in the Quran says only He can remove it. So you know, let me finish the ayat. It says, if He touched thee with happiness, He had power over all things. Even a person with very little understanding can grasp what is being said here. So, before I continue, many things like this is said. If affliction comes, only He can remove it. And if it gives you happiness, it is indeed also from Him. because he has power over all things. Do you remember this? Innaka ala kulli shayin qadir, Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali. Remember where this comes from? Every single day, 3 times a day, you make reference to this. Do you remember what Mola Bapa said to us? I am with you every second, every minute, every hour. Did he not? Is this not a point of connection of the spirit? So, what I'm trying to say to you here, Allah says, I am with those who are patient. You connect the dots. So, if Allah is with those who are patient, then why are you so worked up? Why are you so uneasy? Because if there is an affliction, only He can remove it. You being upset and you being throwing a tantrum and you finger pointing and whatever is happening, you only know what you know from what your mind is telling you, either through your negative emotions or your positive emotions. But only He can remove that affliction. So look, it's either you trust in this or you don't. There is no middle way. Okay? There is no middle way. And if you don't, then be the victim of those 5 groups of negative thoughts and of your negative emotion from which they come from. Or if you trust in it, calm down. Be calm. Be calm. What does the dua says? Allahumma ya maulana anta salam wa minka salam wa alayka yarju salam hayna rabna bi salam wa dakilna dara salam. Does it not? Does it not? And to whom are you asking that? Tabarakta rabna wa ta'alayta ya zal jalali wal ikram. To the Lord of majesty and grandeur and reverence. Whom are you saying this to? You are saying to He. You are saying to He, whom the whole creation is submitted. And immediately after that, what do you say? Allahumma, O Allah, Allahumma, Ya Maulana, minka madadi, walayka mu'atmadi. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Thee alone we worship. Thee alone we seek from help. Allahumma, O Allah. Ya Maulana, Ya Maula. Help me with thy kindness. Ya Ali, bilutfika adrikani. Are we so alien to this that we cannot put the two things together in the practice of our daily experience? So, do you see the value and notion of patience? So, as I said, there is a whole dimension that requires deeper explanation. Look, I always welcome your comments, okay? So don't hesitate to send your comments to the team in the chat so that if you're interested in this line of explanation, then I can take them into some of my lectures. That the other one was Kamiya. So, so I said Sat, the truth, Saburi, patience. The next one was Zikr, remembrance. Now, I'll say something about it in a moment, because in today's lecture, and let me introduce to you now, there are these 2 things. In addition to the power of decision-making, the power of concentration, the power of unselfish action, 2 more items in the context of this practicality that I would like to introduce is the notion of presence and remembrance, okay? Remember these 2 words, presence and remembrance. So I'll come to it in just a few minutes. So what is zikr, remembrance. Right now, let me just tell you that it is, when we speak about remembrance, it is an activity, a spiritual activity. It is a spiritual dimension of our being, when activated from the heart, makes connection to the divine. And as a result of that connection, what does it do? It brings light and radiance into the spirit, and the spirit basically throws that light into the mind and eventually the body, which brings this harmony. This is the power of zikr when we say prayer of the heart. It isn't just frivolous remembrance, the tongue just moving, the mind just saying things. Mind you, it's not bad to do that, but it goes much deeper, right? It's the connection. Remember? Connecting with the spirit. In this case, zikr is the channel of the connection with the heart, where the soul, the spirit, and the dynamics of the spirit interplays. Okay? The fourth one was kamiya, tolerance. That's a tough one for a lot of people. But let me tell you just one other word of tolerance. Do you remember Mullah Bapa said to us, quoting Hazrat Ali, and spoke about forbearance? Well, you know what forbearance means? Just bear it. Bear the pain. Bear the discomfort. Bear the insult. Bear it. Bear it. Don't react to it. Just bear it. There is a divine magic behind it, which I'm going to speak about just in a minute. Because remember why I'm saying all of this? I raised the idea about power, right? I said to you, don't lose trend of my thoughts. Power of concentration, power of decision making, power of unselfish action, power. And that's why we are speaking about all of these. So this notion of tolerance has enormous power in it. Why? It's a divine attribute of action potential. Forbearance, the Imam say. Now in that same quote, he mentions patience, he mentions knowledge, and so on. And then this last one, iman, faith. Well, not much can be said in a sense that you know what faith means. And of course, there are different layers of it. But you know, this is one of the greatest prayer that Imam always gives us. He says, strength of faith. How strong is your faith? Based on how strong is your faith, you will understand the notion of sat, truth, saburi, patience, zikr, remembrance, kamiya, tolerance, and of course, iman, faith by itself. Now, let me conclude this part by quickly explaining this notion of power. What power are we talking about? I just said it in a minute ago, just a moment ago, right? Just a moment ago, in quoting to you the ayat of the Quran, where he says, he had power over all things. Now, when he says all things, does that include you or not? Does that include the whole of mankind or not? Does it include the earth and space and the planets and everything that exists in the universe? Yes, it does, because in the dua we say, as it says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alameen, worlds. He's the Lord and creator of all these worlds in plural. So don't limit the notion of power to what our puny little mind does. That's nothing. That's selfish understanding. Go beyond. Go to creation. Go to the world. So what happened? He had power over all things. Do you not say that in the dua? Innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Ya Ali ya Muhammad, ya Muhammad, ya Ali. Do you see here, let me make a point of connection. When we take our tasbih, we say Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali. Or, Maulana Bapa said, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad. Or, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Or, Ya Shakarim, Ya Shakarim, Ya Shakarim. Or, Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali. As we said in that very part of the dua. Are you able to see the connection? Why don't you make use of it? Why are you not with it? This is where this notion of power comes from. Who will give you the power of decision-making, of concentration, of unselfish action? It's a power. It comes from Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali. Let me go a little further. Let me go a little further in helping you make this connection practically. Okay, so what is Ya Ali? Do you know what Ya Ali means? Ya Ali, the name of our first Imam, the name of all the Imams. You know, when we say Ya Ali, Ya Hazar Imam, this is in our tariqah. Don't be timid. This is a well-known fact in Shia Islam and specifically in our tariqah, right? So read the preamble of the Constitution. You will find this link, right? But it's a matter of individual practice. So when we say, Ya Ali, Ya Hazar Imam, Ya Ali, Ya Shakarim, please say Salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. What is the meaning of Ya Ali? Let me say it to you in very clear terms. Ya Ali is the totality of Allah's power is called Ya Ali. Are you following me? We are back to this power that the Quran says in many places, but I'm using this particular verse, Surah 6, verse 17. He had power over all things, like we says in our dua. Who is that he? The dua says, Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali, innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Make that connection. So, it is Allah's power that we are talking about. The totality of Allah's power is Ya Ali. The totality of Allah's grace and mercy, where in this grace, in this mercy, there is truth, there is patience, there is zikr, there is kamiyah, tolerance, and there is iman. These 5 remedies of those 5 group of toxic thought, they come from this grace. And what is Ya Muhammad? The totality of Allah's mercy is called Ya Muhammad. Please say salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So do you see, when you reach to your tasbih and you are saying, Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Ya Ali. What are you saying? What are you invoking? What are you calling? You are calling the totality of Allah's power, the totality of Allah's mercy. Now, when Allah says in the Quran, I am with those who are patient, do you see the category of patience here? What is lacking? What is lacking is our faith. We don't have faith in it. So we suffer. Despite the disclosure of this hakikat. So let's move a little further. As I said, we could spend the rest of the lecture saying it. Let's explore very quickly what is emotion. Okay, I've mentioned the 5 groups of negative thoughts which creates negative emotions. What about positive emotion? Making emotions positive. Well, you know, one of the ways today in modern psychotherapy, and certainly in the branch of positive psychology, which in my future lectures I will probably introduce it to you, we have today, you know that we at least identify today the human being having at least 9 forms of intelligences. We call kinesthetic intelligence, social intelligence, musical intelligence, mathematical intelligence, and we have 9 of those. But among those 9 intelligences, one of them is called emotional intelligence. And this emotional intelligence is at the center of what governs self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skill, and so on. Emotional intelligence surrounds and governs all these elements. Now, let me say something very quickly here. Emotions are thoughts that are charged with feelings. Remember this. Emotions are thoughts that are charged with feelings. What kind of feelings? Now, stop right there and think about it. If your emotions are charged with negative thoughts, what kind of emotion there will be? Negative emotions. What kind of feelings you will have? Negative, right? It's a simple equation. But do you want negative emotion? Do you want this negative reaction? Because remember, all those actions and reactions that belong to those 5 categories of negative thoughts, they act as an obstacle to the spirit, to the soul. They in fact destroy the mind and intelligence. Remember? So you don't want that. So now you have to say, no, I want my emotions to be positive. So emotion, you have to understand. Use your logic. Use your reason. Use the power of your decision making here. That emotions are thoughts charged with feelings. So what happens? They are high energy thoughts. Very powerful. They are high energy thoughts. You don't want those negative emotions with negative energy thoughts. They create destruction. It's like a tsunami. It's like a wave that can be destructive or that can be positive. So, because these emotions are charged, guess what? They create waves. And they can create waves. Let me tell you one thing. They are waves of a very, very powerful force, formidable force. And you know where that force comes from? It comes from the spirit. So now we are using the power of the spirit in a negative way, if it is negative. But guess if it is positive, what happens? Wow, power. If it's positive, it will create a positive change, positive reaction. What you desire positively will come and manifest itself. So this power is the power of the divine. Remember, The totality of Allah's power is Ya Ali. The totality of Allah's mercy, Ya Muhammad. Now, if you have the totality of Allah's power and the totality of Allah's mercy, what is missing? What is missing? You see? So now you decide. You know, you have been given as a human being this power of concentration, power of decision making, power of unselfish action. Which side of it do you want to be? The only answer in our tariqah about this question and this challenge is the holy firmans of the Imam of the time. Please say salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Without which you will lose your way. You will lose your way. But if you remain within the farmans, you will discover the way to make connection with the spirit in that very practical way. So, if these thoughts are negative, guess what they do? They produce wrong knowledge. Now, remember a moment ago I said to you that it creates an obstacle. The mind has to be purified and all of that. So why should we not delve into these negative emotions? Because it distorts the mind. It creates cloudiness. There is no clarity of concentration, no clarity of decision making, and the action becomes selfish. So then what happens? It's destructive. It's negative. And when that happens, guess what? You will act with wrong knowledge. And then when that knowledge doesn't fit what comes to you, you're going to say, oh, no, that's not what I want. No, that's wrong, but I am right. Now your ego has become your God rather than your spirit. So you have to change your thoughts. And remember what I've said? New thoughts should lead to new choices that should lead to, so start with the new thoughts, right? The positive thoughts. And remember the positive thoughts, they are charged with divine power. So be positive, right? So these new thoughts should lead to new choices. It should lead to new behavior, which should create new experiences. Now you have a positive experience that should lead to the creation of new emotions. New emotions. Now these emotions are positive. They bring you happiness. And it should inspire new thoughts again. And this creates what? A transformation, right? So let's move on. Let's move on quickly. Now, I know we are 2 minutes away from 1:30, but we started about 10, 12 minutes late. So I'm going to capitalize on those 10 or 12 minutes. But we are still within our, timeline, okay? So let me move further. Talking about the mind and its concentration, the power of concentration, the power of decision making, the power of unselfish action, and so on. So what are mystics telling us? Mystics are telling us when the mind becomes purified like a mirror, what happens? Knowledge is revealed in it. What did I mention just a few seconds ago? All those negative incoming toxic thoughts that create negative emotions. What do? They create the wrong knowledge inside you, and you then act wrongfully. But look at here. Mystics tell us when the mind becomes purified like a mirror, knowledge is revealed in it. What kind of knowledge? That's the question. And then the mystic says, care should therefore be taken to purify the mind. Now, how are you going to purify the mind? in our tariqah, as indeed it is expressed in the Quran and in all the world scriptures, okay, that there is no way to purify the mind until you fulfill your spiritual and material responsibilities in a balanced manner. And the balance consists in our tariqah. I emphasize, although these concepts are in the Quran very strongly, but in our tariqah, dua and dasand. But the order is dasand and dua. Dasand number one, dua number two, and then your ibadat and whatever other obligations you have taken. Now, I've already said a very few things about the dua just a few minutes ago, right? In the dua itself, it also speaks about dasand in the fifth part of the dua, which is part of the Holy Quran, verse 8, Surah 8, verse 27, chapter 8, verse 27, Surah Anfal. So very quickly, because you have to make this practical connection. How are you going to create detachment? And as an act of this detachment, as a result of this detachment, it will lead to purification of the mind, which is, let me remind you of the principle of dasand. It is the human intellect. The human intellect is linked, connected. We are talking about connecting to the spirit, yes. The human intellect is linked to divine intellect. Now, let me change the word. It's the same thing, except I've used different word. It is the human spirit that is connected to the divine spirit. Same thing. The concept of intellect is spiritual. Therefore, we use intellect or spirit sometimes interchangeably. So it is the human spirit that is connected, linked to the divine spirit. How? Through the divine principle of dasand. What makes the connection? Have you asked yourself, how is my spirit connected to the divine spirit? The connection is dasand. Make no mistake. Don't think of dasand just in your own material way. It goes far beyond that. You know why? It was the first principle in creation, even before creation came into existence. The principle of dasand was the first thing that was created, even before physical creation came into existence. And that principle of dasand is the glue. It's the glue that keeps the whole universe and everything created together. And when it comes to the human spirit and the human intellect, it is the principle of dasand that makes the connection with the human, the divine intellect, or the divine spirit rather. And it is through this divine principle of dasand which makes possible the flow of grace, which illuminates the human spirit, the human intellect. Are you with me? Are you with me? Because if this principle is not there, there is no connection. There's no way to make connection. So you see, this illumination, this radiance of the intellect, of the spirit. Remember, they are the two faces of the same coin. This illumination of the intellect, this illumination of the spirit becomes the basis of this cosmic rapport, of this cosmic harmony of human life with the rhythms of creation, with the rhythms of nature, which brings what happens when you have that rhythm in you through the sound, which brings barakat, superabundance, which creates plentifulness, which creates prosperity in the material and in the spiritual realm of human existence. When you connect with the spirit, this is the result. Now, today, as I said, this is part 2 of this lecture, part 2 of 2, and connecting with the spirit in a practical way. Practical. Remember, ask yourself, are you regular and are you as accurate as you can in your dasan, in your dua, in your ibadat, in your religious duties, and so on? That is the base, practical. You don't need to go and read a big book or philosophize about it. Remember that the sound does not belong to us. It belongs into Allah's hand, because that is the covenant, that is the agreement, that is the contract we have signed with Allah Almighty to say, Ya Mawla, the sound is not mine. This is your property. It belongs to you. It's only in my hand, so that as an act of faith, to prove to you, Mawla, my love and my faith in you is pure. So here is my dasand. And remember, make no mistake. Let me be absolutely very clear. This dasand belongs in Jumat Khana, not anywhere else. It means in the hands of Mukhi Kamriya Sahib, Mukyani Kamriani Sahib. I won't say any more than that, but you understand what I'm saying. Don't give it to this charity or there and there. It's not for you to give. It's not your property. Give what is yours. The dasand is Allah's property in Allah's hand. That hand in Jamaat Khana is the hand of Mukhi Kamariyas, Mukyani Kamriani Saiba. That hand is the hand referred to in our dua, Yedullah. And that hand is what Mola Bapa says, I place my hand on the shoulder of all my murids. Yes, can you make the connection? That is the fundamental basis of achieving it. Now, I have maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and I will tell you in a moment what I intend to do in my next week's lecture. But before that, there are these 2 concepts that I would like to just say a few words. And I will say a lot more about it as a totally new lecture in my next week's lecture, and we will bring many other elements. But today I want to say this. The concept of presence and remembrance. Okay? What is that concept of presence and remembrance? Now, let me begin by a common factor that everybody should know, ought to know, and must know. What is that concept? That concept is when a murid says, Hazar Imam. What does Hazar Imam mean? Hazar means present. Imam means Mola Bapa himself. And when we say Imam, we are meaning he who is the possession of Allah's Nur. Mola Bapa himself. Please say Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. In our tariqah, Mola Bapa is that Nur. Okay? Now, don't go philosophizing here and there. Do that if you like. But I'm saying to you, keep it simple. Keep it practice. Mawla is Nur. It is his Nur. And when we say Hazar Imam, we are expressing and articulating that that Nur is present here on earth with us. Who says that? Allah says that in the Quran. Allah is the light. Allah is the Nur of the heavens and the earth. Is it not in Surah Nur? Allah is the Nur of the heavens and the earth. So that is Hazar Imam. Now, what is your connection with Hazar Imam? You can say, I'm a murid of Hazar Imam. You can say, I practice the Ismaili faith. All of that is good. But remember what? I'm speaking about connecting with the spirit. So we are the human spirit. When I say human spirit, remember what Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah says in the memoirs? What is prayer? Prayer is a daily necessity. Prayer is the direct communication of the spark with the universal flame. That means our spirit is a reflection, it contains a reflection of the Nur, the divine spirit. It means a particle of Nur is inside us, which belongs to him, right? It belongs to him, doesn't belong to anybody else. So if it belongs to him, that particle that is in us, then it is his property. It is his command. It is his belonging. And it is that which makes us who we are in terms of being a spiritual being. So Mola Bapa says to us, my beloved spiritual children. Do you see the connection? Look, it's right there in the word, right? Spiritual children. Well, you want to make connection with the spirit, you better be very clear about this concept, because this is not a status, a position. This is not an honor, a grace, a mercy that is given to any soul anywhere in creation. Okay? Because Allah says in the Holy Quran, Al-Ruh min Amra Rabbi, the spirit, the soul is by his command. And he also says in Surah Nur, Allah guides to his light whom he wills. Allah guides to his Nur whom he pleases. So I'm saying to you, if you believe you are into that group that Allah has chosen to guide to his Nur, then you better think very seriously about it. Because not thinking about that, you have cut yourself off. And if you intend to think in the right way, gain benefit from that connecting thought, then remember that that is established by the principle of first the sound and then dua. Now, I promised to say something about ginans. We are still within our limit. I'm just taking the time now that is belong to the Q&A, but we will have to perhaps dispense of it for a few minutes. I promised to say something about ginans. So what is it that I want to tell you? Very quickly, and I'll develop this topic when we have the series on Ginan education. But today, I want to say this to you in the context of making connection. Have you realized one thing? When you look at the holy Ginans, now, who are the Ginans composed by? The holy Pir. Who are the Pirs? Just like Mola Bapa himself is the 50th Pir and the 49th Imam. The Pir is the one who has the Noor of Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in them. And through that Noor, they have composed this Ginan. The Ginan is a composition from that divine light and grace. And sometime Mola Bapa appoints a separate Pir for the task. What task? The task to give recognition of the Holy Imam. Remember this? Or sometime the Imam does it himself as Imam and Pir. And Mola Bapa today is both. He is the 49th Imam and he's the 50th Pir. So both of the offices are combined in him. There is no separate Pir. So do you see where this body of Ginan belongs? It belongs to the Pir. It belongs to the Holy Imam. And what is the purpose of that body of knowledge we call Ginan? Every Ginan has been intended to guide the believer and the murid to try to know and understand the true hakikati marifati meaning of who the Imam is. Please say salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Do you see that? So when we recite Ginan, that knowledge that we are speaking about comes through Ginan. And it is just not knowledge by itself. It is knowledge infused with love, ishq and akal, as it says in the Ginan, abateri mobat. So the idea behind that is two things. Remember, presence and remembrance. The Holy Ginan gives us the ability to go deeper into this holy presence. And the Ginan recited today, what did it say? Do you remember the key point? Imam Begum says, I discovered who is that true guide, the true Satguru, meaning the Imam. So she is one of the Sayyida, but remember the Pirs who also are the ones who have composed the majority of the Ginans. They also give this message in a much more terse, much more open way. And basically the Pir basically says that Noor is the Imam. Do you have your connection with it? So the notion of Ginan is, the Pir is teaching us in the Ginan how to make this connection with the divine spirit. But you see, when you recite Ginan, you are automatically uplifted into the level of the human spirit, beyond the mind. Of course, you are using the mind as a channel to go into your own inner spirit. Then what happens? Light comes in. For example, one Ginan says, Allah ek HASSAM sabuka. The whole world, the whole creation belongs to Allah, as the Quran says. Right? And in the same Ginan it says, Nabi Muhammad bujo bhai to tame pamo imam. Please say salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Do you see the teaching of the Pirs in this Ginan? Know who Nabi Muhammad is, then you will come to know who the Imam is. And that is indeed what the Quran says. The Quran says, in which Allah says to the Prophet, O Muhammad, is it not in our dua? O Muhammad, declare to the people that which was revealed to you. And if you do not do so, your mission would remain incomplete. And that was what? Reveal who the Imam is. Reveal who the possessor of the Noor is. This is in the Quran. This is in the Ginan. And then It doesn't stop there. Remember we said the function of the Holy Pir, amongst others, is to give the hakikat, the truth, to teach the truth about the recognition of the Holy Imam, which is a fundamental principle in Ismaili Tariqah. And you remember Mullah Bapa says, that is the fundamental principle. The Imam said it himself in Moscow, remember? The recognition of the Imam. And in the Holy Pandiyat, Mima Mustansevila says, and I'm just cutting short, and what he says, there is the Shariat, there is the Tariqat, there is the Hakikat. And the Hakikat is the recognition of the Imam of the time. And what is that Hakikat? What is that Hakikat? Ali, Islam Shah Raja, Allah ye Imam. You decide what this means. The Pir has made it open. And the Pir says, don't go just looking up in the heavens and here and there. Allah guides to his Nur whom he pleases. Allah is the Nur of the heavens and the earth. Make the connection. Ali Islam Sharaja, Allah ye Imam. So we leave that to you, to your intellect, to your spirituality, to say and discover that. So that is the notion of presence. Presence. Now, so on the one hand, you have the presence. Now, what do you do with this presence? Look, let me translate it to you very simply. So Mola Bapa is present with us. And let me give you the evidence. Don't you say, hey Zenda, when you come to Jamaat Khana? Don't you get the reply, Kayam Paya? That is the notion of presence. Okay? Now, the presence is there. Mola Bapa says it himself in his own way. I am with you every second, every minute, every hour. Are you? But are you with him? He says he's with us. The presence is there. But are you with him? If you are not, power of decision making, power of concentration, power of unselfish action. If you have that, this becomes evident. So don't simply say, Mola Bapa is with me. It's good to say. Go a little further. Remember, practical connection, practical approach. Feeling. Is your feelings there? Do you need a textbook to tell you what feelings are? If there is the presence, the next thing should be the feeling. And when that feeling is there, meaning you are making the connection between the heart and the knowledge in your mind about the presence. And that leads to remembrance. Remembrance. So what did Mola Bapa say to us? Remember? Remember? Isn't it amazing? There is one place Mola Bapa said the word remember 11 times. I can't go into it in detail, you know why. But you understand where Mola Bapa said, remember, 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 and remember, 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 remember. I was counting it on my tasbih, 11 times. He said, remember, and never forget. Never forget. So who was he asking us to remember? When Mola Bapa said, my beloved spiritual children, I am with you all the time. Are you remembering him? The remembering the name of the Imam of the time continually. When Imam says 11 times remember, and he says never forget, it means continually. You know what that means? That is the highest form of ibadat, highest form of worship. There's nothing higher. It's the highest. And we find that in the Quran. Remember continually. Now, what that does, when you have presence and remembrance, I have already explained presence. This is the remembrance, the zikr part of it. And remember, our zikr is very specific. Other tariqas, Sufis and others, they have their own way, it's fine. But ours is guided by the Imam of the time. And in our concept, the Imam is very clear that the true Islamic concept is that of the intertwining. So what happens when we do that, when we have this presence and we have the remembrance? What happens? We have what is called Anand, the Ginan that ALWAAZ recited today, Ananda Japamia. You know what this Anand is? Luckily, Lakshmi translated it right, and it refers to this bliss. But you know what Anand is? Look at the word. He said, we have been blessed with this bliss. Let me tell you, in Ginanic language, the word Anand means Mola Bapa himself. Please say Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Is another word for Mola Bapa himself, the word Anand. So when there is presence and there is remembrance, the result is Anand. And you are elevated to such a dimension. You know which dimension? That your power of concentration has become unique. Your power of decision making through that Anand is clean and clear. And your power of action, whatever you do, because of this Anand, is done and it's due because of him. You will not do it for any other reason. You say, Mola Bapa, you love this thing. I want to do it out of your love. Not for me. Not for me. Can you raise your actions to that level, to that concentration? Can you? That I'm not doing this thing for me. I'm doing it because it pleases. It pleases my Imam. It makes my Imam happy when I do these things. And you know what happens when you make the Imam happy? When there is presence, there is remembrance. It brings Anand. And you have done that which makes the Imam happy. You know what happens? The gates of heavens open up for you. And there are things that come from heaven to you that you can't even conceive. You can't even believe. But they come to you as a gift, as a grace, as a mercy. That is the basis of our tariqah. We in our tariqah believe in this grace. We believe in this mercy, in this love, in this compassion. And it comes through the notion of the presence and remembrance of Mawla, which is truly the real basis of making connection with the Spirit. I'm going to stop here, inshallah, with Mola Bapa's blessing and mercy. Next week, we'll have another lecture, and it will have many newer, many higher dimensions of many things I've spoken in part 1 and the part 2 today. And we will, inshallah, explore those other dimensions and how we can continually improve the clarity of the mind, how we can improve the clarity of our practice, and always remembering the promises that we have made, so that we can practice and be regular into our tariqah, bring nur and light into our whole being to bring us this Anand. Mola Bapa bless you all. If I may give you prayers right now for those who may wish to leave, that and then I will leave it to Lakshmi to decide what she wants to do. May Mawla bless you all with barakat, with good health, with divine protection.
Amen.
May you and your family always be safe.
Amen.
May Mola Bapa make this miracle in your heart, in your mind, in your intellect, in your thinking, in every breath that you take. May you feel and know that Mola Bapa is present in front of you and with you and in everything that you do.
Amen.
May Mola make you witness to your own self that you are constantly remembering Mola Bapa's name, and whatever action that you take in life, whether it is through your work, through your seva, through everything that you do, it is to please Mola Bapa so that you may be blessed with his anand.
Amen.
May Mola Bapa give you good health to you, to your family. May Mola's hand be upon you to keep you safe, to protect you, to guide you, to illuminate your heart, your mind, and your intellect.
Amen.
You may do the right actions, the right deeds,
Amen.
so that through your unselfish action, may Mola Bapa bless you with Zahiri and Nurani Dida. Amin.
Amen. Amen. Wow, that was a very, very enlightening session. So much I filled 2 pages. But I'm sure, and I saw that the comments in the chat are very, very positive. The feedback is very wonderful. People want 3 hours, but I know that we are limited in time. And I think we have a lot to digest. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassam, for this exceptional and so practical session. I think we have lots and lots of tools and knowledge we have gained from this session, everybody to put into practice in our daily life. There is only one question in the chat that I think we can address. I will try to generalize it. It's about of course, it's about understanding the concept of the sound. Yeah. The question is related if one person has understood it, but within the family there is no that understanding. So the question is, what do you have to do to avoid friction in the family? Is it we have to choose between din and dunya?
It's a difficult question because,
Yeah.
when families are involved, all other kinds of things and baggages are involved. But let me say this to you, that you begin, if you're able to convey a message to your family per se. Do you know, we use the word dasan, but remember, in every single revelation that has come, in every single teachings of the 124,000 prophets that have revealed, that have come on earth, all of them universally have told mankind that this is a fundamental principle. The principle, they call it tithing, call it dashans, call it dasan. In the Quran, you can call it ushra Allah, you can call it khums, you can call it zakat, and there are many other different names that have been given in other scriptures about these. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because I mentioned to you earlier on the notion of cosmic rapport and dasan being the glue. Okay, so you have to basically, I know this individual may face some challenges in wanting to convey this message, but remember this. The Quran says, even in our Ginans, the peers are given the explanation, every single aspect of creation. When I say aspect, I did not just want to say living being. I wanted to say more than that, including stones and mountains and everything that has ever been created. They give the sound and they do ibadat. This is in the Quran. We interpret it, our holy peers have given this interpretation in the Ginan. So the question is, you as an individual, and I think the individual asking that question can pose that question and say, are we not part? Do we not, as individuals or as families, do we not want to be into this harmony so that we may benefit from this barakat? And besides, it's not something that belongs to us. So the question is, out of love, out of affection, not out of coercion, no, not out of threat, not out of discomfort, out of knowledge, out of reason, that one is able to convey. Because remember, however resistant people may be in a family, everybody has a reason. Everybody has some intelligence. And if you were to tell somebody and said, look, you know, the sound, it doesn't belong to us. Yeah, it comes through us. We become the trustee. That's what the ayat of the Quran says. But it doesn't belong to us. Now, tomorrow, if the holy Imam comes in front of us and you are facing the Imam, what will be the condition within which you present yourself? Are you going to be comfortable to say that, you know what, I am pocketing that which belongs to you? That's an agreement spiritually. We have signed with the divine. Now, if you have somebody doing that to you, that which belongs to you, somebody else is taking it, and then they have a face of being a saint, would you agree? Would you accept? Now look, I'm not saying things to rock the boat in your family or wherever. What I'm saying, present the matter in a logical, intellectual way and basically say, this does not belong to us. And if it doesn't belong to us, well, give it back to its owner. Give it back to the one to whom it belongs. Is that not logical? Is that not logical? But now if you decide and say, no, I won't give it back, I'll keep it. Well, if you have made that decision, remember, with every action, there is reaction. That's a negative action. There will be negative reaction. Don't blame that on the notion, well, the curse of God and this and that. You know, you have to be logical into your approach. Okay? Islam is logical. Our tariqah in Islam is based on the intellect. And your buddhi, your intellect, your reason, your thinking, your heart tells you, this is not my property. It doesn't belong to me. It has to go back to its owner. But if you say, no, I'm going to keep that. Well, you've made a decision. Was it a decision? Remember the power of decision making? Did you make the decision negatively? Positively? Well, there it is. If you make positive, there'll be positive reaction. If you make negative, there's negative reaction. So I don't want to go into the negativities of things, but it is a simple matter of spiritual ethics when you say, this does not belong to me. Besides, let me ask this question. In our tariqah, do we not depend on the Imam's grace, mercy, and blessings? We do. Now, how can you face the Imam when you have taken a decision that is contrary to our practice? You want all the blessings, but you're not ready to fulfill that which is part of your obligatory religious commitment and covenant. When I say obligatory, because in the Quran, Allah has made it obligatory. And therefore, that which is obligatory has a purpose. And we have to say, no, no, this is not negotiable. The sound and my dua are obligatory in my tariqah, in my practice. Every day, I have to say my 3 dua. It is obligatory. You know, I have to say this to you too. Even going to Jamaat Khana is obligatory for the true murid. I can't go into the details, but somehow I will weave it somewhere. But it is obligatory. The only reason is the conditions of our life and existence and commitment and engagement sometimes does not allow us to go to Jamaat Khana every day. But those who can and those who do, it is a huge, huge, huge divine blessing to them. Amazing. But it is obligatory to come to Jamaat Khana. It's not a voluntary thing. The reason why Jamaat Khana exists is precisely for this spiritual connection. So, I would say to the person who asked this question, put on the table logical, loving, intellectual question, because we as human beings, we thrive on this logic and we thrive with this intellect. And basically, that is a principle of our tariqah. That are we prepared to say that we are willing to take that which belongs to someone else and not return it? No true believer in any religion will do that, because it is against the principle of spiritual ethics to do that. People make mistake, then remember what Maulana Bapa says, correct it, and vow not to make that mistake again. Then you benefit. And I would say, if there are difficulties related to this concept and idea, open up, pray for grace and mercy, and watch, because that grace and that mercy is ever present. Remember what I said to you, presence and remembrance. If you're honest and sincere that you want to do that right action of basically giving the song, returning the amanat in the hands of the Holy Imam, pray and be grateful that if that opens up, you will be the most fortunate ones. Allah bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. I don't know, you have your commitment, so will you take another question?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the difference between silent zikr in terms of reciting personal tasbih and collective zikr through recitation of ginans at the level of spiritual connection? Is it that collective recitation of ginan or zikr connect us from inside to the outer higher spiritual realm, and the personal zikr or bawl connects us from outer spiritual realm to our inner world? Please explain.
This is a lecture in itself.
Yes.
But look, Maulana Bapa said to us, our faith is a personal faith, it's an intellectual faith, and it is an esoteric faith. So we have different levels of participation. We must never forget that. So what I would like to do is, rather than rushing through it for the sake of time, in my next week's lecture, I will try to incorporate some of these elements. And obvious, and we will of course have a Q&A also next week, but I can take it. But I understand, if I understand the question correctly, there is individual participation and engagement, and there is a group participation or engagement, and there is uh, uh, levels by which we understand what these levels of engagement actually mean. And at the individual level, there are different ways, and at the collective level, there are different ways. So I will address those next week in that particular lecture, and I will try to bring it in.
Okay, so I think I don't know this person. Okay, I think so that we can. I think we can end the session then. I would like to express our gratitude to you, Dr. Hassam, and give you some prayers that may Mola accept your seva. May Mola give you always a lot of success in all your endeavors and reward you and your family with lots of barakat in Deen and Dunya.
Amin.
And on the occasion of Eid al-Adha, there are lots of participants also who have wished you Eid Mubarak.
Amin.
So I'm reiterating that. And my prayers for all the barakat, for all the sacrifices you are making to impart this knowledge and better understanding of our faith to all of us. And this is a very good example in following Hazrat Ibrahim's sacrifice in the way of the faith, and you may be rewarded to the highest position for your soul.
Amin. And to you, Lakshmi, for being present today, to Faiza, to Zahir, to Nusri, to Nayab, to all the other team members, visible and invisible. Mola bless you all, and all the prayers you have given, Lakshmi, may all of these come back to you all and to all the participants infinitely more as a grace and as a mercy from Eid al-Zoha, and may you carry that blessing every day in all that you do, in all aspects of your life. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Shukran. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hassam.
Thank you. Thank you. Yalimada to everyone. See you next week, inshallah.